All right, well, welcome back to the Honey Optics test bench. We live in a world where we are used to having prices, especially the prices of electronics, go down all the time. I mean, think about what a 65-inch TV would cost you today versus what it would have cost you even 2 or 3 years ago, and sometimes that difference is a very large amount. So when we encounter things like cameras that demand a bit of a premium when it comes to price, and that premium seems to be holding fairly steady, we may wonder why. And turns out there's a pretty specific reason for it. And in fact, there's 4 or 5 reasons as to why they cost what they cost and why they are probably worth what they cost. So first and foremost, when you talk about any camera, whether it's a PTZ, a traditional camera, whatever it is you're going to talk about the image sensor. The image sensor is the chip in the camera that actually takes the light that comes into it and converts it into something that becomes a video source that computers and switchers and all that kind of stuff can go down the road, right? That sensor is the thing that basically replaces film, right? Takes the visible light we all see and changes it into something else that we can then use through electronic means. Those sensors, as you can imagine, are very sensitive. They're very difficult to manufacture, and they need to be manufactured at the highest quality. Any sort of blemish in that sensor will show up in the quality of the video. So oftentimes when manufacturers make sensors, they test them and quite often, many of them don't pass muster and basically have to be thrown out. And so you really want that image sensor to be good, high quality, which means it's going to cost you something. Those prices have come down a little bit. I mean, the availability of things like high quality 4K sensors for a reasonable price is rather new, but they don't tend to come down as fast as we would expect, like things like other consumer electronics to come down, simply because of what it takes to manufacture them. So one of the things that you are paying for, and actually a big thing you are paying for when it comes to camera quality, is the image sensor. It is often the single biggest priced item in the whole thing. The next thing that you're paying for is the optics. Now, if you're used to like taking pictures with your smartphone or something like that, you may have a few different lenses on the back, and it may be doing a little bit of what we call optical zoom, that means actually using the lenses themselves to get closer to the subject. But most phones instead rely more on digital zoom, where basically it is just sort of expanding the picture that it is otherwise taking. The problem with digital zoom is you lose quality the further you zoom in. High-end cameras, and especially PTZ cameras that are good for live streaming, rely on lens zoom, which means that if you go from being kind of a really, really wide shot into a really, really tight shot, you're actually physically moving the lenses in the camera, or in order to focus a different part of what is available onto the image sensor. What that means is the image sensor is capturing the full quality all throughout that zoom range. And that maintains your quality of your video no matter how far or close you go, as long as you are in that optical zoom range. Some do offer additional digital zoom. You'll see that a lot, especially on like low-end camcorders and things like that. But the stuff you want to use, especially for daily use for live streaming and important things, is one with high quality optical zoom, which is also why you will see like cameras that offer 12x zoom are going to cost a little less than cameras that have 20 or 30x zoom, simply because the lenses and manipulating the lenses becomes more expensive, and you have more going on and more lenses involved in order to make that happen. Lenses also have to be very finely manufactured. You really want high quality lenses that are doing what they need to do, incredibly high tolerances, in the similar way, for your glasses or whatever, you want those to be high tolerance as well. The other thing is once you have the video signal from your lens and from your into your sensor, you got to do something with it. You got to send it somewhere. So higher quality units that cost a little more will also have more output options. They'll have more ability to get that video out into the world where you need it. You'll see traditional HDMI out, which you're used to seeing on your television and your laptops. You'll see the round SDI out, which is the more professional standard that can also carry that HD video much further in distance than, say, the HDMI can. And some of your even better units will also have the ability to use NDI, which actually takes the video signal and compresses it into something that can actually be sent out over your network, which means that signal can be directly taken in by your computer without any hardware in between. That is a great, nice feature. But in order to have NDI, there's some licensing fees involved and those sorts of things. But you also have to have some pretty high-end, computer power in the camera itself to basically compress down that image without losing a lot of quality. So the ports and the connectivity is another thing that you will find versus cheaper cameras that are basically only going to have an HDMI out or something like that, and then you basically have to just work with what they give you. So that flexibility, of course, is important. And then finally, there's the overall quality of the camera itself, right? You don't want these making a lot of noise, right? When they were used mostly as security cameras, it didn't matter as much. But really in a live streaming environment, especially for something like worship in a church, where there can be some quiet, reflective moments, you don't want the sound of the camera moving around to be distracting. That means using things like high quality motors that are both precise, because you want a nice smooth pan and tilt, but are also quiet. And again, that requires precision, which means it requires a little extra expense. And then oftentimes also just the overall quality of the construction and the build. What you want in one of these cameras is you want to be able to mount it up on your wall and let it sit there for years just working and becoming just having a reliable source of video, whatever you chose to do down the line. So if you've wondered why these things tend to cost what they cost, that's what goes into the cost. And oftentimes when you find one that maybe doesn't cost as much, somewhere in that line, some compromises have been introduced. Either it's not as compatible, the lenses aren't as good, the sensor isn't as good, whatever it is. But especially if you want to stick with a quality product, made from quality materials, like most things in life, that's going to come with a little extra expense. But what you get out of the longevity and the quality is also often worth it because a well-built PTZ camera like our Honey Optics is something you will have and will serve you for years to come. All right, well, I hope you found that brief overview helpful and useful, and thank you for joining us.